This is a moment when we have to consciously, intentionally choose our future as a species. And it feels to me like it's, creation has posed us with a final exam to determine whether we are a species worthy of survival.
We live in a time of fundamental change. Serious challenges loom ahead. The path we must walk is new and uncharted. If we are to find our way, we must discover what is true, what is connected. We must make peace with the earth. It is time to come home. Our journey has already begun. At farmers markets like this one in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, news from an unraveling global economy has spurred a new interest in locally grown food.
Local farmers, local producers, local bakers, everybody local. People are much more aware of it, and I think sadly China made us aware last year how important it is to know where you get your food from.
It's critical that we support local farmers and farmers markets as a result, just in order to strengthen the local economy.
Maybe more expensive. I'm supporting what's grown here, and God knows it may happen that we have to supply our own food.
The change on the minds of so many this Saturday first emerged in popular consciousness nearly 4 decades before. On October 6, 1973, Egypt and Syria invaded Israel in the beginning of what was called the Yom Kippur War. 10 days later, industrial nations had their first glimpse of the reality we face today. On October 16, 1973, OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, stopped oil shipments to the United States. The cheap and abundant petroleum the U.S. economy depended on suddenly was neither, with consequences for the entire nation. The resulting recession of 1973 to 75 was the worst since 1932. The stock market lost 45% of its value in 2 months. Inflation rose to over 14%. Oil had to be rationed. Price controls were introduced. Amidst the confusion of that time, an economist for the British Coal Board named Ernest Friedrich Schumacher, E.F. Schumacher for short, published a little book of essays entitled "Small is Beautiful: Economics as if People Mattered." His words helped launch a movement for change.
Greed and envy demand continuous and limitless economic growth of a material kind without proper regard for conservation. And this type of growth cannot possibly fit into a finite environment. E.F. Schumacher.
Among those in the United States who read Schumacher's words was Bob Swan, a writer, a thinker, and a builder with a long record of nonviolent activism.
Bob Swan was an innovator in community, local, and regional economics in the latter half of his life, second half of his life. In the first half of his life, he was a Gandhian peace activist.
Bob had read the essays that are now in the book, Small is Beautiful, in a publication out of England called Resurgence. He had heard in those essays a new voice around economics, a new voice about our way of living on Earth. Schumacher provided a new context to bring this discussion forward. He pointed us again to local economies, to face-to-face neighborhood transaction.
In 1973, Schumacher's vision faced serious obstacles. The newly emerging global economy, based on free trade, promised freedom and abundance for everyone. With the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980, a kind of laissez-faire capitalism, championed by Milton Friedman and the University of Chicago School of Economics, dominated U.S. economic policy for a quarter of a century. In this world of global free trade, the idea of small-scale local economics seemed irrelevant. The purvey of a group of social dropouts who began a back-to-the-land movement in the 1960s and 70s. Small is beautiful was called unrealistic.
Look at what realists have done for us. They have led us to war and climate change, poverty on an unimaginable scale, and wholesale ecological destruction. Half of humanity goes to bed hungry because of all the realistic leaders in the world. I tell people who call me unrealistic to show me what their realism has done. Satish Kumar, Director, E.F. Schumacher Society of Great Britain.
In 1980, Satish Kumar asked Bob Swan and his partner, Susan Witt, to found an E.F. Schumacher Society in the United States. They had recently moved to the small town of Egremont, near Great Barrington in Massachusetts, Berkshire County, to establish a community land trust. On a mountainside just down from the Appalachian Trail, Bob Swan and Susan Witt built a home and an office, and later a library. They began the work of implementing Schumacher's revolutionary ideas.
The Berkshires meant a garden, home, a living of the ideals we were talking about, and not just theorizing on them.
Small is Beautiful is a philosophical work, and Bob's work is practical. It's about the implementation of small-scale, localized community economics.
They started with the most fundamental aspect of a local economy, the ownership and use of land.
We abuse the land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect. Aldo Leopold, A Sand County Almanac.
Bob Swan believed if we are to foster a culture of love and respect for land, then land can no longer be an item to buy and sell on the market. To that end, in 1967, he founded, with Martin Luther King's cousin, Slater King, the nation's first community land trust in Albany, Georgia, to give African American farmers permanent, affordable access to farmland. A community land trust is a form of common land ownership governed by a charter that can mandate sustainable and ecologically sound land use.
Bob formed the community land trust movement and began to codify what a new system of land tenure might look like in America. So if you think about it, if you're starting from scratch, what would be the fairest way to hold land? Bob would say it should be regionally based, nonprofit, open membership, democratically structured organization that would be the holders of land.
I do think that the community land trust model is a good model. for kind of beginning to remove land from the equation. I think land is kind of with water and with air, kind of it's the commons.
The Indian Line Farm is a project of the Community Land Trust of the Southern Berkshires, the local trust founded by Bob Swan and Susan Witt. Site of the nation's first CSA, the farm was operated by local food pioneer Robin Van En from 1985 until her sudden death in 1999. The Community Land Trust purchased the Indian Line Farm from Robin's heirs and leased it to two beginning farmers, Al Thorpe and Elizabeth Keene.
Working with the Land Trust enabled us to essentially get into a farming situation for less initial cost. Having to buy this farm outright with a mortgage would have been I think a full-time commitment off the farm, earning the income to pay the mortgage.
The concept was individuals would own buildings and other improvements on the land, but not the land itself. The lease is a 99-year lease. On leaving, people get a fair return, a return equal to the rise in building costs in the region, which means probably equal to the rise in salaries in the region, but not that super sweepstakes ticket that comes from the unearned increment in land value. So instead of always imagining moving on, they dig deeper roots into the community.
We certainly set out just to grow high quality, an abundant supply of vegetables that are going to feed local families. We try to make this a place that people want to be here for longer than 5 minutes just to get their food. And so it has created a certain kind of a community, and people really enjoy coming here.
I believe in the importance of what's going on in a small community, and I'm kind of a believer in small is better, small is beautiful, a kind of Schumacher philosophy, I think. If we don't support these small farms and we let the agribusiness take over in the world, this is not going to be good for any of us.
When a region unties its capital from land, it creates new investment capital which can generate new local businesses that will produce goods and services once imported from other regions. Bob Swan in Land, The Challenge and Opportunity.
The Southern Berkshire Mountains, where the E.F. Schumacher Society was headquartered, has a limited amount of tillable land. In the 19th century, textile and paper plants located along its riverbanks. Small farms filled the river and stream valleys. The town of Great Barrington formed its cultural and political center. Equidistant from New York City and Boston, the region had attracted a large population of second homeowners and vacationers for over a century. This seasonal population affected the cost of living for year-round residents, particularly in housing.
A lot of the service industry jobs that we all know don't pay that much. They have trouble getting employees because they can't afford to live in the Great Barrington area or in the Southern Berkshire region. They have to commute from places farther away.
A number of people that I knew were renting, and they could only find 9-month rentals. And then the other 2 months in the summer, they had to get out of their house so that the owners of the house could get big bucks.
Bob was primarily a carpenter. He was concerned to create housing that was affordable for people. But he discovered that no matter how much he worked to bring down the building costs, the cost of housing continued to rise. And in looking at it, he realized it was not the cost of housing rising, it was the cost of land rising.